is up? What is up, everybody? We are back. We are back with another one. It's episode 121. Yes, 121 of the Standing A podcast. Man, it's going to be a great show today. We got one of our usual suspects, Mr. Ringside Ruiz. What's going on, Kilo? Steven.
How's it going, boss? Just ready to get this episode started. Super excited to have our guest here. I've been thinking about all kinds of questions, and I'll probably only remember two of them, but I had tons. So we'll just, I did my homework, but I know I'm just excited to have her. Excited off the weekend. Got to hang out with you this weekend. Super excited to have everybody. Hope everybody's safe. Ready to go into this Monday, but excited to ask Miss Liza about her UCLA Bruins taking on USC crosstown rival. So we do our homework here. We know what's going on.
Yeah. Hey, so you already kind of led into it, man. Without any further ado, we do have a very, very special guest today, Liza Brereton of Liza Brereton Law. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I had fun watching all the fights yesterday and just kind of recovering from a full day of boxing.
Oh man, I mean, you talk full day was I mean, it was quite the marathon. It was a great one, but it was a marathon for sure. Multiple meals. So, oh man, it was great. So let's start off by just getting to know you a little bit. Let's talk about your journey. The thing you're into a lot of different things. Very, very interesting individual. Let's just talk about your journey. You and how you got into your passions for boxing and in law. Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Tommy. So I got interested in law actually in high school. I was on the mock trial team, and then I worked at a battered women's organization as a legal advocate. So I always really enjoyed feeling like I was being of service and somehow, giving back. And so that was one way to do it. It's something I really cared about for a long time and still care about. But I realized once I was in law school that wasn't really necessarily the path I wanted to go on for my career. And so I went to UCLA for law school, go Bruins, and decided to work at a firm for a while and was doing different types of business law and business litigation at a couple different firms, and also worked at a nonprofit organization. And then about 3 years ago, I went out and started a firm with two partners and was doing, again, a lot of business law, really learned how to run a firm by doing that. And a few years before that, I had really gotten into boxing, but I hadn't merged the two. So more recently, a few months ago, I launched my own practice, Liza Brereton Law, that has a big focus on boxing. It's not all I do. I still do a lot of business law, litigation, trademark work, employment issues. But the merging of my passion for boxing and law has been really exciting, and it's really the happiest I've ever been as a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for almost 20 years. So it's nice. It's nice to have found this lane that just feels very authentic. And I love working with people in boxing. Obviously, it has its challenges and has its toxic side and all of that. Yep. But I really love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Steven.
You said something that really resounded with when you were saying it, that you've been practicing law for quite a long time, but you recently found a way to merge the two and you've really enjoyed it. So once you've kind of found your career and you're able to merge your passion, to me, that's genius when people can do that. A career plus a passion, you put them together, and now I'm cooking on all cylinders. Describe to me that feeling when you kind of knew, like, this is what I should be doing. Obviously, the stuff with the battered women shelter, that's tremendous work, and that's something that can always need a battle fought for it. But also, as you progress in your career, what is that like, where you're like, you know what, I love boxing, I have a passion for it, I know my law, and now I've merged them, I'm cooking now. What was that like?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I really got into boxing around a little bit of a late bloomer, but don't hold it against me. I was always a tomboy. I always loved sports. I played soccer in college. But just growing up, boxing wasn't really part of my household. It wasn't a focus really where I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So later in life, I got into boxing. I was actually kind of going through a hard time, and I felt like I really needed an outlet. And I just found the nearest boxing gym. I walked down the street from where I lived in Hollywood and went down to the Hollywood boxing gym and found a great group of guys that just took me under their wing and were so patient with me, and just fell in love with the way that you really have to let your ego go in boxing. It's interesting to be someone who's generally athletic and then start a sport and be just terrible because you've never done it before, just to not have realized how hard it is. So all of that and just the physical outlet of it, I loved the presence of mind that it requires. I loved it's such a wonderful mental practice. And I think that's maybe one of the hardest things about boxing. To be in it by yourself. I'd never played a solo sport. I'd never played an individual sport. I was always a team sport person. So that was great training. And yeah, I just fell in love with it. Started learning so much more about the sport, watching the sport, and got a little obsessed. So at the gym, how actually the launching of it to be merged with my career happened is I was at the gym. I was talking with one of my coaches, Tolis from TK Boxing. And he said, he's like, you're always talking about boxing. He's like, you know so much about boxing. It's all you talk about. You know, why don't you do boxing journalism? I was like, well, Tolis, I'm a lawyer. I'm a lawyer. I took out a lot of debt to finish law school. I'm going to stay on this path. But I thought, maybe I could do something professionally with boxing. It hadn't occurred to me, which now sounds strange because I'm just inundated and I inundated with it and I love it.
Yeah.
But I had to get over a little bit of imposter syndrome of like, do I know how to do this? And when I put my mind to something, I just really dive into it, and I learned it, and I read a ton, and I talked to a ton of people, and I asked people to have calls with them, and I just really kind of went to boxing school and learned a lot, and was lucky to kind of get in touch with some great people who were helpful, and now it's really taken off. And I think I didn't realize there was such a lane that needed to be filled, someone to provide information about rights and duties in boxing. And so that is a lane I didn't even know was open or needed, but I just, in a very kind of organic way, have created and that's my lane now.
That is awesome. That's awesome. And just like you said, I mean, boxing has its way of pulling you in, where you can get really, really just like addicted to the sport, like the sport, the distance, the discipline, the consistency. It takes a lot of passion. It takes a lot of drive, initiative to get up and show up every day and continue to power through and keep that momentum and that motivation. But man, I know just being in those gyms and going through some of those workouts, and even as you said, like as you came about, like just needing that type of outlet, and finding that, like the relief, what it can do for you, just overall mentally and physically. It can do some wonders, when you think about it from that perspective. So that's pretty awesome to find out, how you came about, merging these two lives together, if you will.
Yeah, and I'd always had, I started my law career at Quinn Emanuel, which is a big firm, and they do everything. And we were sort of trained, you're a generalist. Like there's a new kind of law, you learn it, you figure it out, and you do it. And so I had practice with that, right? I never was someone who had like a very niche practice where I only did one kind of thing. I think I would probably get a little bit bored with that. So I've always been someone where the practice is shifting and you learn new things all the time. And you kind of have your general lawyer training and how to deal with contracts, for example. In a lot of ways, it doesn't matter what kind of contract it is. Some ways it does, but you have that foundation, and that you can just build from that pretty quickly. So that's how I did it.
You had mentioned you're very much, it sounds like, a go-getter with all your accolades that you had from the foundation, Ring of Brothers, which we'll touch on a little later. But some of your sports heroes, Flojo, I saw, was one of them. You're into hiking. So it looks like when you take something on, you're kind of like me. I want to be the best at it immediately. And when you mentioned that buzzword of you got to leave your ego at the door, that means I've got to be willing to learn. And sometimes that's tough. Like I said, myself, that I like to know it immediately, all of it that I can. But boxing does inundate you, and you become so obsessed with it that you're like, you know what? If I'm as smart as I say I am, I know a lot to learn. So you being a college athlete, what is that cardio like? What's the difference in the cardio with? I mean, when I hear soccer player, I'm Hispanic and I don't play soccer. I couldn't run up the street. So that's why I lift weights, because if something happens, we got to fight it out. I can't I can't run from you, but we'll, if I have to run, we're gone. But
Yeah.
What's the cardio like between for you, as now let's say Liza the boxer, cardio as a soccer player and cardio as a boxer, and how did that help you, if anything, on the getting into the gym?
This is going to sound so ignorant to all the boxers out there, but as a soccer player, you have your field is 100 yards. Okay. So I used to watch boxing and see these people the boxers get tired like pretty quickly and be sweating and breathing. And I'd be like, what is the big deal? You're in this tiny little ring. Do you know how big a field? Like now that I've done it, I think it's absolutely crazy. And it's so ignorant. I didn't know any better. So I would say that the conditioning, in some ways it's very similar because they both require so much cardio. It's just, I think, for whatever reason, for me, the boxing cardio wasn't as obvious because you're not running, right? But you're doing all this other work with footwork and obviously intensity of taking punches and punching and moving. So I think that, they're actually pretty similar in terms of cardio. And I do think the history of, look, it's been a long time since I played college soccer and my cardio was a lot better then, but I do think it gave me a foundation. And also just for the tolerance for a certain level of physical exertion, right? Like pushing past where you think you can and being like, man, this is so hard, I want to quit, and realizing, okay, that's just a thought, but I'm not actually going to quit. I'm going to just keep going. But it was definitely more intense than I anticipated.
Being from Detroit, did you quickly I saw you've been at a Clarissa Shields fight. Yeah. Did that connection kind of come very quickly with her being from Detroit, you being from Detroit as well, and then both y'all having the passion for boxing? You're like, hey, she's accomplished, I'm accomplished. We're both trying to do as much as we can in the sport. That's somebody that I can follow. Because me personally, maybe I might not like the best boxers, but I do love boxers with a great story that I can root for, that I can cheer on. Because there's a lot of guys in boxing, not good, not bad, what have you, but maybe their story really doesn't relate to you yourself. And then there's some where you're like, man, everything that this guy stands for, or the charity work he does outside of his boxing, what have you, things like that might also gain you fans besides you being successful in the ring. Besides Clarissa, are there any other ones? Or if you want to talk about the fight that you got to go out and watch her perform and what that's been like.
Man, that fight was so great. I'm a big fan of Clarissa's. I actually have been since she was in the Olympics, even though I didn't follow boxing a lot when I was really young. I think it was my mom was like, hey, do you know there's this boxer from Flint in the Olympics? Because, it's I didn't grow up in Flint. I grew up in Ann Arbor, but not too far from there. And so she'd definitely been on my radar. I've been a fan of hers for a long time. I've always thought that she deserves like more respect than she's gotten. I think now it's shifting finally. But that fight was great. It was, undisputed, the first undisputed heavyweight championship of the world for women. The Flint showed out. It was packed. Everyone was just, so supportive, and it was a great environment. And also a strong undercard, a lot of good fights on that undercard. So I was really, really happy to be there. My family was there as well, and my boyfriend came. So it was really fun to just have everybody there, and especially with a family that didn't necessarily go to a lot of fights. Like, people's first fight, to see that was pretty great. But yeah, I think she has an incredible character, and I think that's part of what what's cool about boxing is, in part, I think, because it's an individual sport, and also, right, it's a blue collar sport generally, right? I mean, people kind of fight their way out through boxing often. And so you do have these incredible stories of perseverance, determination, overcoming obstacles, really overcoming all odds. I mean, it's incredible. The sport is full of those kinds of stories.
You mentioned the atmosphere. That is something for me that's also, I'm sure Tommy too.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man, you're at a great fight, or something magical is happening when just the crowd is just giving it everything they have, just like the fighters are. Mm-hmm. That's always such a cool feeling. I'm trying to think. I went to a San Antonio card where Canelo fought Trout, and it was about whole stadium was just giving it to Austin Trout, and you could feel it. But that adrenaline rush can really help a fighter or hurt a fighter if they take or give too much from it. So it's a pretty cool feeling. But it sounds like you're firing on all cylinders, because one of my favorite things to do is have friends and family at events, because it's, look, this is my passion. This is what I love doing. We're married. We have friends, families. And when you have everybody there, you're just checking off everything off the list. You leave with the popcorn, the shirt, everything. So kudos to you. It sounds like from everything we've heard, you're just firing on all cylinders, especially with the niche you found with some of these fighters really not knowing that maybe this is an avenue I need to probably commit to being very serious first. Obviously, besides them taking care of themselves, their bodies in the ring, things like that, their coaching, but also to protect themselves legally. And when they have somebody like yourself, somebody that you can trust and that's gonna say, hey, this person's gonna look out for me. I think again, it goes on that firing on all cylinders where, okay, my business side is taken care of. Me and my coach are doing everything in the ring that I've got to do. My nutrition's right. Without errands in there, without going into too many specifics, what are some of the main common things that you've seen when, as boxing fans, media, things like that, you hear all the time, fighters tell other fighters, send the contract. So this is why I was so excited to have you.
Yeah.
If I'm telling Tommy Rush, I'll fight you this Saturday at AT&T Stadium, Jerry's World. We're gonna sell it out. You just bring yourself. I'm gonna bring myself. We're gonna do it. I'm gonna send the contract. What are some of the things?
Champs here.
Yeah. What are some of the things that, as a boxing lawyer, that you're like, okay, I got to see this first, or are these couple things to know that they're serious about this fight?
Yeah. Well, obviously, you always want it in writing. You absolutely want everything in writing. You never want any part of any deal to ever be verbal, ever. Okay. So that's number one. And then, you want it laid out pretty, so you're talking about like about agreement. So you'd want to be clear what this, what the split is, what the minimum is, how the payment will be made, when it'll be made. Some of that is just statutory. So it's based on the state where you live and there's kind of no wiggle room around it, but you still want everything laid out very clearly in terms of the money, the split, who's the money getting paid to? Is it going to a manager first, or is it going to the fighter first? How's it getting distributed? Those are some of the main things. What happens if, with weigh-in, is there any kind of clause regarding any issues with weigh-in? And you want to have a sense of how that's going to happen before you get there.
So I follow your IG page, and then you even mention it. If you have fighters coming in from overseas needing a visa, that could really, and we've seen it recently, and we've seen it throughout the history of boxing, where we were so excited and amped to see a fighter fight, and a guy from Brazil, Honduras, wherever it may be, couldn't get his visa in time. It didn't work out, and that fight had to unfortunately fall out. I saw in your IG that you say, hey, we can help with that. So what are some things maybe that fighters, if they're watching, and coaches and managers, hey, if you got to fight and you're an American fighting in Germany, or overseas now in Saudi, where all the big fights are happening. Hey guys, I suggest, as a lawyer, you start getting your passports. You go to Walgreens, you put a nice little polo on, and while you're waiting, you get your stuff right. But what are some things you would suggest just to make sure your passports are right for specifically fighters getting ready maybe to do that Saudi jump?
That's a great question. So my practice does not include American fighters traveling abroad, although you've given me a great idea that maybe I should figure that out. Given
10%, and I'll send it to you in a contract. It is not verbal. Thank you very much.
Now that Turkey's, in the role he's in, that probably would be very lucrative. So I don't actually, have a lot of insight for American fighters going to fight abroad. Although my general advice would be start before you think you need to. You always have the passport updated. You always also need your passport it can't be expiring within a year, or 6 months might be the minimum. But if it's, coming up within the next year to expire, renew it now, all of that. You just want to have that basic stuff set to go. I'm sure about that. For foreign fighters coming to the US, the first thing is that you cannot get that visa on your own. so I posted a little reel about that. I got so many foreign fighters writing me, which I totally understand. There's a great need for, foreign fighters have a great need and desire to come to the US to fight and train. Totally legitimate, but you must have an employer, who in this case would likely be the promoter, bringing you here. And that promoter / employer has a significant piece in the visa application process.
Because technically, aren't they putting you on a work visa, so to speak?
Yes. It's called like a non-immigration like work visa. So it's the P1 is great because you can stay for up to 5 years, but it is a fairly, comprehensive application process that requires documentation and evidence that you actually are an athlete of a particular caliber. You have to basically be, like a very experienced and successful athlete in boxing in this particular case. So if you don't already have the promoter or employer lined up, which I know is a major challenge for so many fighters, then you can't start that visa process without that first. So that's the biggest thing that I saw is like a misunderstanding from fighters.
I think, Tommy, we need to get her if she would like. I mean, I just like ideas and
yeah.
I think it would be really cool that if we got her connected with like a Golden Boy or just a different outlet, so that way she could answer those questions for some of those guys. It's like, hey, this is kind of our on retainer in-house counsel for visa applications, and she's the guru, so get her going. That would be cool. But I mean,
hey,
obviously,
let's do it.
We also, like I said, we'll take a cut, but I'll settle for
two. Joke, everyone.
yes.
I'll settle for 2 tickets to the show. I'm super easy.
Ringside, right? Ringside tickets.
Yeah. Rings. It's got to be. You notice it doesn't say Nosebleed Ruiz. It says Ringside Ruiz. So, all right. I guess, Tommy, did you have anything before I
no, go ahead with one more. Go ahead.
Okay. Is there anything that's exciting when it comes to that kind of stuff? Are you like a shark type lawyer? Or are you like, I'll just get you with the black and the white, the rules, I'll beat you with the encyclopedia of knowledge that I have? When you're doing these types of things, I can imagine sometimes it could be, well, no, that's not right. Or you're trying to take advantage of a client of mine and I can't have that. What is that like when stuff starts to get a little bit like, again, not specifically, but just your style of, I'm going to look out for my people first and foremost. That's what I love to do. And now that I'm in this boxing game, it got worse for you people on the other side.
That's funny. Great question. It depends on the situation. So I generally start friendly and professional and cordial. That's just my personality. I think it's just a good way to treat people until they kind of prove that you have to treat them differently to get anything done. So, but don't, mistake friendliness and being cordial with weakness, because they're not synonymous. And I generally find that one of the big things I see in boxing is a lack of skillful communication. So I see so many disputes where really the problem is communication and people's egos getting in the way and people being very reactive. Oh, you're going to try to tell me this? Like, you don't know, right? And it just turns into this like, and so if we can just, I think that's a big piece of what I see. So when I come in, I try to, as much as I can, use helpful, positive communication to solve the problems. And if the person's not hearing me, you can only do so much, right? If somebody's not trying to hear you, they're not trying to hear you. And it doesn't matter what you say. So my next step is usually like outmaneuvering, right? Like good analogy would be like, fight like Shakur. So outmaneuver, outbox.
Yeah, control the ring.
Use skills, and maybe people, just not necessarily throwing haymakers the whole time, because I generally, again, don't feel like that is actually successful. So, and I always keep at the forefront my client, right? I'm trying to do, it doesn't matter so much how I feel about this, but like my goal is to have a successful outcome for my client. So sometimes it's outmaneuvering, and sometimes it's like, sometimes the other party may not even realize they're in a fight. You know, if you can outmaneuver because you're trying to neutralize them, for example,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes neutralizing is the best way forward, because if you try to go toe to toe, you're going to be in a big, long, expensive battle and you might be in court. And I'm a litigator. I can go to court, but generally that's not a great outcome. It's going to be expensive and time consuming. So sometimes you have to do it to get what, you know, where you need to be, but it's not something that I don't strive to be in court using up my client's money for that. So yeah, it really depends on the situation, but obviously, like, we have to take it to the mat, we'll take it to the mat. It's just, I never want to start there. It's not authentic to my personality to start there.
Go ahead, Tommy, because like I said, I can go all day, but I know we got to stay on the rail somehow.
What she just said right there, it resonates with me, man. I just posted something just recently that said I may be laid back, but I can lean forward real quick. So I feel you. You know that we take it there. We got to take it there. But
Yeah.
So of course. So let's talk. I mean, you have a lot of great information and things that you share, on your Instagram with your reels or posts are great. Another few things that you've talked about, as you talk about with just helping different fighters and just helping fighters just period with, information. One you talked about was really a really great thing and an awesome call out about boxers forming their own business, and being able to, utilize like the tax write-offs for things, benefits with the expenses, training,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. So talk a little bit about that. Cause I think that's something that a lot of people don't really think about and connect the dots on.
It's so important. I do see a lot of fighters doing this, but not, more should, and there's really no reason not to. So when there's no downside to something except maybe a little more effort on your part to get organized and get it set up, you should do it. So yes, fighters should operate as a business. Now look, each state is different. So I'll just speak to California because that's where I live and I have a lot of clients here. So in California, for example, you could be a sole proprietor without having to do anything to like form a business. You don't actually have to file anything with the Secretary of State. It's very low maintenance. You don't have an additional tax fee like you would just to set up a more formal business, like an LLC, for example. If you have an LLC or an S corp, you would have an annual a fee, it's a tax fee, a minimum of $800, for example, and you have to file formal paperwork with the Secretary of State. But if you're just starting out, start as a sole proprietor. The biggest difference between being a sole proprietor and having an LLC, which is a limited liability corporation, or having an S corp, is that as a sole proprietor, you don't have liability protection for your own personal assets that are like separate from your business stuff. But as a fighter, your risk of liability is pretty low. Like, who's going to sue you over what, right? Where if you own a gym, totally different. If you own a gym and you have people at your gym, people can get hurt. Your employees can sue you for discrimination. Like you have a contract that goes south, you can get sued. There's tons of ways to have liability. So there you clearly need to be an LLC or an S corp to protect your personal assets, like your car, your house, if you have a house, your bank accounts. Okay. But if you're just starting out as a first step, sole proprietorship, and that way you can, you need to keep track of your business expenses, which include things like training camp, paying your trainer, paying a nutritionist if you have one. You can even, let's say you have a gym in your garage of your home, you can write off that space. Gym dues, all kinds of things, travel for business meetings. So really, I recommend that people talk to a good tax planner, financial and tax planner to talk about this in more detail. But even the California Secretary of State websites and other Secretary of State websites have information for regular people to help them understand this stuff. So that is definitely something that fighters should be doing, because then you're reducing your tax burden. These are business expenses, they're legitimate. And that way you can be writing it off and owe less in taxes. Yeah.
Super, super, super nugget right there for a lot of people. Some great things. I mean, it's just wise. It's just smart. It's smarter, not harder. I mean, if you can write it off and you're doing it anyway, I mean, come on now, no brainer. So,
And if you're, try to keep track of this as you're doing it to help yourself. So put them, if you want to get fancy, you can put it like on an Excel sheet or get a program for it, but you even can just, save the receipts. If it's on your credit card, make a note about which expenses were really legitimate business expenses and keep track of that. And then when you talk with your tax person, it's all kind of ready to go.
Yeah. Yeah, and then just like even when you talk about this stuff too, right? Like keeping the receipts and things of that nature. You talked about you had another reel where you would just share just basic information that some people don't think about. We talk about the visas and everything, right? And passports. You talked about keeping copies, multiple copies of your contracts. When you sign, regardless of if it's main contracts with third parties, whatever it is, keeping copies of those contracts at the ready to where in the case of an event, you don't want to be trying to find those things, not have those things, and then be in a rough position that you don't want to be in when you could have been prepared.
Because guess what? If you really, really need a copy of your contract, guess why? Because you're in a conflict with the other party to the contract. Do you want to be depending on them to give you a copy? You don't. And I would say 70% of the contracts I've seen in boxing, even from, higher level folks, managers, fighters that have been world champions, they are not fully signed. It's either blank or there's only one signature. It's not fully executed. Look, this doesn't mean there's no contract. It doesn't mean that it's not enforceable, but it will make your life so much easier if you have the fully signed version in your possession so that it's the right copy and it's not a draft.
Yeah.
And you won't have to ask anyone for it. And it's part of like taking ownership of your career and treating yourself like a professional, right? You are in your, busting your butt in the gym, doing all these workouts and all this nutrition, discipline, all the things. Bring that also into more of like a thinking of yourself as a professional and more of a business sense, right? And keeping your documents in order and things like that. And it can be hard, it's hard to stay organized, but just find a system that works for you.
Yeah.
I think this is why I was so excited about having you on the show, is because there's a lot of things that you're saying that I myself, who's nothing compared to the legal mind you are, obviously, but you want to tell these young fighters that are so vulnerable and very young, inexperienced in world travel, in business and taxes. You've got these 18-year-old bulletproof guys or girls that are so at the prime of their peak fitness. It's like, what are you going to tell me? I'm a millionaire. I'm 20 years old. I've made more money than anybody in my entire family ever has. I know what I'm doing, but in reality, it's like, maybe you don't, because you know what you're doing, everything in the ring, but it doesn't change outside the ring. Just like Miss Liza said, okay, so how's your business set up? Who's handling your receipts? Oh, well, oh boy, that's been my friend since high school. Okay, so he's a tax accountant? No, he just went to community college for a year and then we've been tight ever since. No, man, like you got to make sure you're protected, because we have guys like Canelo, my favorite fight, one of my favorite fighters, who's been in contract disputes, and Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade, who has been in contract disputes. And now you're a great talent, but now you're wasting time on your very limited career as in the boxing game. Like Miss Liza said, you don't want to be in litigation for 1 to 2 years, or you can't fight. Mikey Garcia, who's, with Top Rank, had that issue and he was out a couple years. So it's like, I need to be making money, but instead I'm in the courtroom fighting a fight. And maybe it's because I didn't do the due diligence, like Miss Liza said. I didn't have my contracts. So I guess what I would say is, I'm Steven. We've rolled back the clock 20 plus years. I just became a signed fighter. If I'm under your legal counsel, what's kind of the super team I'm trying to make? Hey, we need to have a lawyer, an accountant, somebody that's in charge of the business that you're running, but not just mom, dad, sister, cousin that's doing all the business. We need to have some real pros, and that can be a tough conversation, but I'm here to protect you, the client, and I don't want to have, Tommy Rush Jr. suing Tommy Rush Sr. for the, the monetary value rights of the name because y'all didn't set up right? What are some things, I guess, that you would say, okay, brand new fighter, you're a superstar, you're a stud, guy or girl, you've made it. You just got signed to DAZN, Golden Boy, Top Rank, Matchroom, any of these guys. This is what I would first do if I were you. Maybe not word for word, but a little bit of overview.
I do think it's helpful, and I recommend having your own lawyer look over everything. Doesn't have to be me. There's other good lawyers out there, but have a lawyer who knows boxing law look over everything for you. For this particular situation, that fighter is in a position to have the means to do that. And it is so much better to do it up front than try to fix it down the road. And look, nothing is bulletproof. Okay. We're dealing with a bunch of humans, and we're dealing with fallible humans. So you can't completely guarantee that you can prevent a dispute, but it is worth it to spend some money up front to see if what you think your contract says is actually what it says. And your interpretation or your understanding or what somebody told you is how it's going to work is what it actually says in writing, because those things are often inconsistent. So that's number one. And look, if you're working with a team and they get offended and there's some big conflict because you want an independent lawyer to look over stuff, that is a red flag. That's a red flag. Maybe they can have a quick little attitude about it. Okay, but then they say, fine, okay. They make a big deal about it. That's a problem. In no other business would people have a problem with you having an attorney look over things. Okay, yep. So if they have a problem with it in boxing, when we're talking about millions of dollars, that's a red flag. So I would recommend before you sign with anything, have a lawyer look at it. Okay, so hopefully you haven't actually already signed with a promoter. Do this first. But then, like you mentioned, a financial accountant and a tax planner. I know a couple great folks who I recommend to the people I work with. They're very trustworthy. And these people have told me stories about how they have identified promoters I will say stealing. Promoters stealing from their fighters, and people, that it's just this is not 25 years ago. This is more recent than that, sadly. So it still happens. So you don't go in with blind trust when you're hiring an accountant or a tax person. Do some due diligence. Do some looking into, do you know someone who has worked with this person and can really vouch for them? Not just because it's like your cousin or something, but because they've shown there is evidence that they are trustworthy and that they will actually catch these types of things. So that's a piece of it. And look, these things are not, some of this stuff is hard to do, but it takes some time, but it's worth it. Also, I really recommend really recommend ensuring transparency around finances. So it's one thing if a manager is just spending money on your behalf that's not in advance, okay, that they're not requiring that you pay back. That's one thing that I think you could be more flexible. They might find it to be a pain to be giving you a bunch of accounts. Okay, that's fine. If you don't have to pay it back, who cares? But if it's an advance and something you're going to owe back, or it's people handling your money and then distributing it to you and others, you need complete transparency over that as contemporaneously as possible. So within 10 days or 30 days at the most, you're getting a detailed accounting of where the money went, who it went to, and why, and if there were deductions, the reasons for that. Some of this is required by law, but that doesn't mean it always happens. And again, if people have a problem with you asking for this, that's another red flag.
Yeah, I seen and you see a lot of that. Again, just in recent times, we start seeing stuff being uncovered in some of these contract expenses that were claimed, and you look back and it's like, oh well, yeah, y'all wrote down that this costs this much. It's like, and y'all did how much? You bought how much soda? Yeah. So it's just like all of these different things that could just be rolled up into that again, like you said, if you're not having somebody do the due diligence of double checking, just dotting all the I's and crossing the T's to make sure everything is the way it needs to be, there could be a lot of slippage in there. And you talked about promoters, and even when it comes down to it, managers. And another one of your reels that you were sharing just about just the information on how the percentages can vary state to state on the manager end. Just being aware of those types of things. Also, tons of information for people to feed themselves and arm themselves to be prepared, because like you said, you're dedicating a lot of time, effort, energy, passion, just every all you got really, blood, sweat, and tears into the sport. Why not have that same level of commitment for your financials, your family, your livelihood, things of that nature, and just quite frankly and simply what you've earned. You're the one that's putting in that hard work. So have that type of level of discipline when it comes down to just making sure it's all the way it needs to be. That is, phenomenal. What I want to jump into and have you tell us a little bit about, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but just talk to us a little bit about like your role and responsibilities when it comes down to the Ring of Brotherhood Foundation.
Yeah, this is a really exciting new partnership. The Ring of Brotherhood Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and I recently joined the board of directors and the clinical research committee. The clinical research committee is made up of mostly doctors, nurses, trainers, and nutritionists, and then there's me. So I know the least about the science of the group, but I'm hanging in there. But it's really interesting, and the mission of the organization is to provide advocacy to athletes, and it's primarily so far focused on fighting, but it's all athletes who have really suffered life-altering injuries, and a lot of the focus has been on brain injuries in boxing. So it both advocates for fighters who have suffered these types of injuries and who sometimes have resulting disabilities. And it also, we're growing, and the foundation is really kind of growing in its capacity to do its own research, partner with educational institutions and other doctors to do additional research to really help try to prevent some of these injuries going forward. And one of the things I think is so wonderful about this organization is that it was built by, and it is run by people in boxing. So, and people who love boxing. So, right, you could see if there's some sort of like outsider organization coming in, that's going to be really hard to make any headway in this space. Fighters don't even want to talk about brain injuries to start with, much less with a bunch of people who don't really get boxing, or, obviously there's a history of some countries banning boxing, right? So it's just, that would be a whole mess. But here, the organization was co-founded by Liza McClellan, who is Gerald McClellan's sister. And as I'm sure everyone watching your show knows, Gerald McClellan, the G-Man, was at the Kronk Gym. He was a world champion in the early to mid 90s. And very sadly, in 1995, he suffered a severe brain injury and went into a coma after his fight against Nigel Benn. So actually the 30th anniversary of that fight is this week. So very traumatic, devastating loss for the family. Gerald survived, but he has suffered disabilities, and Liza has been his caretaker for the last 30 years. So through that work, through her caretaking of Gerald, she continued to stay involved in the sport. She has worked with the WBC on their grant program, where they provide grants to boxers in need. Sometimes these guys are homeless. Sometimes they are disabled and need more accessible housing. Another beneficiary of the foundation has been Wilfred Benitez. The foundation actually paid for him and his sister, who is his caretaker, to move to another state to an accessible home so they could have a wheelchair ramp and have more access to supportive facilities. So really, I mean, the impact is incredible, and Liza has been on the ground doing this work for decades, and now she has started the foundation, co-founded it, and we're really building it out, and I think you're going to be hearing more and more about the work. But it's very exciting, and the website, if you just Google Ring of Brotherhood Foundation, you'll find the website, and we're continuing to develop the website and provide more resources and information for people.
Man, that's phenomenal. That is phenomenal. There's been, I mean, obviously you're right in the thick of this type of stuff, but there's been so much talk just over over the years about um, you know the care for boxers after the game,
Mhm.
and the lack of it,
Yeah.
for to be quite honest. And so like this is really exciting. It's great to hear that you all are doing things like this. So yeah, wholeheartedly looking to hear and see way more when it comes to this, and hope and to see it scale and just explode, and do a lot of great things for a lot of great people and their families. That's
Yeah.
phenomenal.
Yeah, and it was a wonderful experience at Clarissa Shields' fight recently in Flint because
Yep.
Lisa McClellan attended,
Hmm.
along with her friend Big Will, who is a manager of Gerald Jr. And Lisa brought Gerald McClellan to the fight, and he's shown improvement lately out of a particular regimen he's on. So this was the very first time that Gerald had been in a boxing arena,
Wow.
other than to watch his son fight, since his debilitating injury in '95. So it was really amazing, and it's very much an honor to meet him. He's one of my favorite fighters, and just to see that he could had the capacity to be there. He was in his wheelchair and Lisa was caring for him, but it really was a very powerful moment, and I was really happy to be there.
Oh man, that's great right there. That's a moment right there for real.
Yeah.
Do things like that kind of give you you take a breath and you're like, man, this is why. 'Cause I myself have passion projects, and sometimes just because you have a great idea or a good mission on your mind doesn't mean it's easy. So when things like that come around where you're like, oh, this is kind of a very cool full circle moment for me,
Mhm.
I need to keep pushing, because there's days I'm sure you are tired. You've been looking at screens all day. You've been reading all kinds of stuff. You're just like, the last thing I kind of want to do is a little bit extra or what have you. But it's just like fighters in the ring. It's that little bit of extra that also makes such the biggest difference. So when you've done, all your law firm stuff and where you're a partner and a senior partner, and then you're saying, you know what? Oh, I forgot this weekend or this Friday, I do have my stuff with the foundation. Yes, I'm a little bit tired, but that's where I need to focus a lot of my time and make sure they got the best of me, so that way we get the best results. So I do want to say I commend you for that, because like I said, as someone myself that's trying to do these things and get them off the ground, it is not easy, but you got to remember why you're doing it.
Mhm.
All of us do this stuff is why Tommy, we love having folks like you, is because you guys are the people that fighters need to know, or people like you that have that same like-minded passion to make sure that the journey's going to be the best that it can be. Because like you and Tommy said, we all love these guys when they're winning, they're in the ring, they're champions, everybody loves them. But then what happens a year or two after, or what happened, man? Oh, I got this injury, and then this injury led to that injury, and before you know it, I spent all my time, trying to rehab, and now I've got not a lot left.
Mhm.
So what you're doing, I think, is super important, and we'll be sure to share it on our page, put it on the links and everything, just so people can be more involved. Because I think the best thing you can do is get the word out on your projects, on people like yourself. Because if you don't know that helps out there, like growing up for me and scholarships, things like that, my
Mhm.
parents didn't know anything about college or grants or anything like that.
Yep.
Looking back, I would have been more appreciative, but you can't fault somebody a little bit if they didn't know. And
Right.
they found out on my third brother, who's doing great. But I just, I always joke, but it's just getting your name out there, getting your services out there, getting your passion projects out there. That is so important. And we'll be sure to do that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I think part of what motivates me is like just seeing, how people like Lisa have been doing this. She's Gerald's full-time caretaker. So if she can figure out how to show up at the meeting, with the amount of responsibility that she has, like I can figure it out too. And I realize I love it. So, I love the work of the foundation. I love the work with my clients in boxing. And so it feels very different than if you're working at a job and you have a boss and they're kind of being unreasonable. So you have to stay late. Like it could be the same amount of time, but it feels very different. Feels a lot better.
Hey, when you love what you do, you never working a day in your life. So hey, that's the way it is. Do you have any other like upcoming projects or anything that you want to expound on, talk about, or anything anything else you got going? I mean, like we said, you are super interesting, and so we've seen so many different things. So yeah, what else is going on in your world?
Yeah, I don't think I have any upcoming projects. We will be having some events around the 30th anniversary of Gerald McClellan's fight. So
Yes.
some of that stuff had to get postponed because of some personal issues and illness that people were dealing with, family issues. But so kind of be on the lookout for that. We're excited about that. And then, yeah, I'm just plugging along. I work with fighters. I also work with managers. I work with some smaller promoters. I work with a lot of trainers. And I'll say, I've seen, it's been, obviously we all know of boxing's toxic and abusive history, which is still a part of the sport. But I'm very pleased to see some bigger players in the sport who are able to be successful and ethical. So I think one of the biggest myths is that you can't make money in boxing unless you screw people over, unless you do these unethical practices, or unless you have these completely one-sided contracts. It's not true. So yeah, I think that the more players with power that treat fighters well, I actually think that if we, that will be a trend, and that more and more folks will want to work with them, right? Because they're trustworthy and they aren't trying to get over on you. So obviously there's always going to be like a little bit of a fight over power in contracts and who has leverage. That's normal, but it shouldn't be these insanely one-sided deals. And I've been very pleased to see that there's at least the presence of some ethical people with power in boxing that are finding a way to make money and doing it the right way.
I just want to piggyback Mr. Tommy off what Miss Liza is saying. One, she's been winning because Michigan football, it's been
come on,
it's been doing pretty good. There you go. And then her Detroit Lions have been doing pretty solid. I mean,
it was a tough ending this year. I think I had my hopes up. Last year, I really could handle it. This year, I actually cried. I cried.
Well,
when they lost.
Now I won't sugarcoat it. The wheels did fall off in turn 4, but at least y'all were in it to where Cowboy fans like myself, we're watching from like the sidelines, not even in the race. So it doesn't, you can feel good about it. But I do want to piggyback off what you said, because again, everything you're saying is just kind of falls in line with what a lot of things that I do like in boxing. And I think when you said that boxing can be a dirty business where it's one side and you kind of screw somebody over, I think that's what people would say as far as making a quick buck in boxing. Doing it the cheap way, the cutting corners way, burning good relationships. And I think one thing that I think me and Tommy have been real fortunate about is we've made some great relationships with some great coaches and managers and people in boxing. And no, oh my God, we just saw just the doors flood open when you connect with the right people. And it's not because you're looking for that opportunity. It's just you met a good person that says somebody's going to call, text Steven or Tommy and say, hey, can you let me know any more about that information about the lawyer? I had no problem. And then you send it on. And it's just, what's the word, Tommy, that I can't even think about it right now. When you're branching out, and we say it all the time.
Like collaborating,
networking. Sorry. I don't know
networking.
why. I don't know why that was such a hard word today. But when you're networking with the right people, before you know it, your tree is so massive, helping out so many different folks, bearing so much fruit off of it because you did it the right way. Not, well, no, I don't know that person, or I can't help you, or they can't help you, but tell me. That goes nowhere. In my opinion, for whatever you do, whether it's boxing, your normal life, whatever, just be a good person. Good stuff comes back out, and you will just see so much better results as opposed to gatekeeping, so to speak. But I don't know how much more time you have. We're almost at an hour, so we'll get it going pretty quickly as far as just trying to wrap up if we don't have too much time for you. Did you have a favorite fight of the weekend? Because me, Tommy, and a group of guys were all together, pizza, tacos, everything we needed. Did you have a favorite fight of the night, or was there a fight that you were looking forward to that night? Daytime.
Favorite fight was Buatsi versus Callum Smith.
Hey, that fight was so entertaining. I thought it was over by round 6. I thought Buatsi was going to just buckle and fold, and he just started just giving up different spots. He'd take a round, get hit in the head, take a round, get hit in the side, take a round, get hit in the center, and just recover, and he just survived and gritted it out, man. That was a great fight. Tell us about that fight. What you think?
So I have top 3. I'll give you my top 3. But that was I think one, I wasn't as focused on it. I went to my own boxing training in the morning, came home, had it on, was kind of cooking breakfast and like getting ready to do some stuff, and I had it on, and I was like, ooh, this is a great fight. I do love inside skilled fighting. So I thought they both did a great job of fighting with skill on the inside, and it was just really a very entertaining fight, and also at a high skill level. It wasn't just like wailing on each other, right? So, and just I thought both guys showed incredible toughness. So that's what I loved about it. I also loved the main event. I thought it was great with Beterbiev and Bivol. I do think Bivol edged it out and won. I know some people, each of those has been controversial, but I thought it was the right decision, and I thought he really had a great game plan of finishing strong. I also enjoyed Ortiz's fight. So I thought that he really showed incredible patience for a young fighter, with Madrimov starting off, with so much energy and so much movement, and he just really showed incredible patience, and then really took over the fight and dominated. What about you guys? What was your favorite?
Go ahead, Tommy.
So I actually like, to be honest, all 3 of those were probably about my favorites. I do think that overall my favorite was the Callum Smith fight. It was just, I think that by the end of it became my favorite, because like I said, I thought it was over. I was like, man, Callum is like, he's in here crispy, he's sharp, he's just comfortable, and then you started seeing him sit down on it and just really just kind of like just get real comfortable in the ring, and I'm like, he's gonna finish him, and I just thought he was gonna buckle and fold, and Buatsi didn't, and I'm like, oh, okay, no way he's gonna last another 2 rounds, and he did, and then he starts coming back, and I'm like, oh shit, like this fight is great. But yeah, that was a phenomenal fight. Obviously, I mean, we're here in Dallas Fort Worth. We're big Virgil fans and supporters. So we were riding for Virgil, and it was great to see him, crit it out and dog it out with Madrimov, and we've seen some of the stuff that's kind of come out later where Madrimov is saying he had bronchitis for 2 weeks, and
I didn't see that. Oh.
Yeah, he's saying he was suffering from, I think, was it bronchitis? I think it was that he said it was something he had like 2 weeks before, and he was dealing with it in camp and still sick. And
he didn't specifically say that. He just said the doctor said that he wasn't this sick, but it was still a big card, so he didn't want to pull out. I just am not a fan of fighters. I know everybody goes to work, and we're not fighters, but you go to work and you're like, oh, my knee from back in the day, or my back from back in the day. Nobody's ever 100%, especially at a training camps. Yeah. So I'm just not a big fan of fighters when they say, well, I would have been so much better had XYZ, my suit wasn't too heavy, or what have you. Like, it's just, I'm not saying he's not classy. I just mean, hey man, the better man won tonight. I think that phrase for a guy that loses the fight should be stapled to your chest the second you lose the fight. If I was a publicist, I'd say, hey man, shout out your team. Thank you so much for my sponsors. Thank you, everybody. Your higher power that you believe in. If you do, by all means, shout it out. But just give that guy that night, right immediately after, his credit of, to me, tonight the better fighter won, and I hope we can run it back or what have you. But the second you start,
I don't know if did he freeze?
I don't. I can see you
Go
when
ahead.
I have. Oh, now you're good.
Okay. But to your credit, Ortiz was probably my favorite fight because it was one that, besides Bivol and Better BF, it was one that a lot of people were saying it could go either way.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're fans of Ortiz, so we have. I'm sorry, I'm speaking for everybody. I have bias because we had Coach Hector Beltran on the show within the last 6 months. I mean, wasn't very long. So we've had Virgil's coach on the show, and he shared insight about, how these guys have sparred and Virgil got the better of him. And we have faith in our guy and that's what he's going to do. And he's a teammate. So he let it be known, hey, we have a great shot at this fight. And it was true. So that was pretty cool for him. Like you said, Miss Liza, the Better Be a Bivol. Anytime a fight in boxing can go by a round or two, as long as it was competitive, it's hard when fans are like robbery one way, robbery run. If it's just judges one round makes the difference. And if a judge favors the aggression or the skillful boxing, it can go both ways. So for me, it was the Ortiz fight, but that whole card, that's what's amazing.
Yeah.
With two fights falling out, it was still a top tier card. And that's why I do like Turkey's presence in boxing, because the money situation, which I was going to ask Miss Liza, is that something that breaks down boxing contracts more than anything is the money? It seems like if it is, that's no longer something that's in the way when it comes to his cards, as opposed to maybe today I'm promotions company A and we're going to take 80% of the pie to your 20. And if you don't like it, we won't fight. Okay, we're not fighting. Now it's like, hey, you're going to make a lot. He's going to make a lot. Show up healthy, show up the best way you can, but we're all going to make money. Show up. And I think that's kind of what's cool and probably affects your life now a little bit more with, back in the day, we used to go back and forth over every dollar. Now it's like, hey, this is what you asked for. That's what you got. This is what you asked for. That you got. We're fighting. Let's do it.
Yeah, I definitely think that the influx of money has obviously made a big difference. He's been able to make huge fights that weren't getting made before. I'm curious what you guys think. Did you see that clip of him coming around at the Shiraz fight and
telling the
score? The scorecard?
Yes.
Now that's a problem.
What did you guys think about that?
Yeah.
I'll go first on that just because you can't have it both ways. And I'm a big believer in measuring. It's got to go both ways. So if I don't like it one way, then I can't like it another way. So I definitely don't like a promoter letting the fighter that he may want to win know what's going on if the other guy doesn't, because it could be an unfair advantage. We've seen so many times where fighters are like, oh, I'm winning the fight, and just box them. And it turns out, no, if you knew the scorecards, it was tied. You needed those last two rounds, those championship rounds to eat the fight, and you laid off. Now, what happens if Shiraz is there and he's like, oh, I think I'm winning. And they're like, no, dude, you need these two or you are going to lose. That's an unfair advantage. And anytime you're boxing, if one side has an unfair advantage, I get you can be competitive on your own team to do the best for your guy and the best for your guy. And if you're doing that within the rules, fine. But now if the promoter that's in between is starting to show favoritism, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Because now, hey, Steven, we want you to come fight in Saudi against my up-and-comer. Oh, no, heck no. I know, I know home cooking when I smell it, and I'm not trying to smell it or eat it. So what happens if we go out there and, I'm delayed, I'm having all kinds of issues. I don't have my luggage. And it's just, I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen, but that's where a logical person can think. If this guy's over here cheerleading for his dude in the middle of the fight, what else is he doing? I couldn't see Bob. Well, I mean, we've seen Bob Arum with different stuff at the ESPN bubble, but I couldn't see Eddie Hearn or Bob Arum or Oscar De La Hoya on the rope. So you're losing, you're down two. Those guys are not doing it, so I don't think he should. Again, he's doing a lot of good, but that's something I don't want to start seeing promoters on the ring apron of their guy that's already usually got it tilted their way. If they're the hometown promoted fighter, I don't want to see that myself, but everybody's different.
Yeah. And I think that, one of the big differences that we've kind of seen come out from this is allegedly, he was actually telling him from the official scorecards, not unofficial, not Chris Mannix, and not, it was like he saw the official scorecards and told him that. And so that's different. That's different. That's different from the Tank fight where Floyd, looked right at him and said, "You need to knock him out. You losing." Like that was based off of his feeling. That wasn't, hey, I went and looked at the scorecard and now I'm going to tell the guy, no, this guy said this and this one said that. Like, yeah, you can't do that, man. I mean, and this kind of goes into a little bit of what the analogy I've been kind of pegging with Turkey is like he's kind of like the Jerry Jones of boxing right now. Like this is like his fantasy football. This is his whole, he is a number one fan that has the A1 front seat of owning and running stuff. And that's what he's doing. He's like living out his dream right now because he can with endless money, and he's playing the WWE role a little bit, like some of the matchmaking, the way he's doing the cards, and these two guys on this card will fight, and it's wonderful. I love it. Like I love the stories and how he's putting all of this together. But yeah, that right there, that was one of those, you got a little bit too comfortable in what you're doing, and you cannot do that one. And now it becomes who all tells him that he can't do that one, and then how does that go?
I think I'm so interested to see if we get a statement about it, if we get a clip of someone asking him about it, or an official statement about it. Or silence. I think it's gonna be very interesting to see what comes next in terms of communication around the video that I saw today.
Well, so Edward Tucker said, would boxing benefit by showing the official scorecards live after every round, or maybe after round 6? I've always said this. I like that because it could help boxing out as far as, again, I've seen fighters that say, well, I thought I was winning by 2 or 3, so I kind of coasted a little bit. Man, you got to leave it all in there. And it's easy for us to say as media or people on the side, get punched more, dude. Get punched more to win. It's easy to say. But if it's a championship fight, now that might be something interesting to take in, to say, hey, championship round will now be broadcasted over in the Jumbotron right above, where they could see, to say, hey, this is where we have it. It's a close fight. The way we have it scored, the winner of this round wins the match. The boxing fight. That could be something. And then it's not unbiased. Again, I think it goes back to is it biased or it's not. And if it's not, both guys have the opportunity to see it, by all means. But like I said, you got the promoter of the show telling the guy, and we're watching that fight, and I didn't think he was going to win. I could have saw him lose by a round or two. And then it ended up being a draw, right?
Split decision draw, I believe.
That split decision draw. And I mean, I just didn't see too much of Shiraz, answering back from Bronco, and he was kind of standing there just going, in the circle and not. And I told Tommy when we were watching, I was like, he's not giving any feints, any head movements. He's not giving any wrinkles to his game. He's not fainting. It's just all like a straight up and down fighter that Bronco was able to not wilt under the pressure of the straight 1-2 coming down the pipe from the long reach of Shiraz. So I don't know. It wasn't a bad fight, and I'd like to see him do it again, but I don't know. It's just unique.
Yeah, I agree with you that I think more transparency. This is generally what I think. More transparency is generally good. I mean, I can see that the biggest downside I see of full transparency of every single round is that then you may get to the 10th round and you already know who won, unless you get a knockout, right? It might be that the scorecards are already skewed to one fighter, so that the only way to win is a knockout. I guess it's still not that you would be, disclosing who won ahead of time. But if there's fighters who never knock people out, you kind of be like, oh, this is over, right? So maybe for the fans, there's less, that anticipation that we all have. But that anticipation, it comes at a big price. And so I did like Turkey's announcement that for the tournament that's coming up, they're going to have, I think they're showing the scorecards after round 2 and 4, and it's
Nice.
8 or 10 round fights, I think. So a little bit more toward the first half of the fight, they'll be disclosed. But I do like more disclosure, and I'm not sure if it needs to be every single round. I think that's probably the fairest, although it might make it a little less exciting. But I would love to see it, like, at least every couple rounds, or at least for the first half of the fight, because otherwise, yeah, it's just and yet then you see these scores that just don't make any sense.
Yeah.
Right. You see scores that are so skewed, and it's just disrespectful to the fighter who lost if it makes it seem like he got his his ass whooped when really it was a lot closer. So yeah, what do you think, Tommy, in terms of disclosure of scores?
Yeah, I do think that I do think that getting it out there would be pretty good. I like your point, and it is a fair point when it comes down to the fans and like leaving a game early because it's a blowout. It's like, all right, now
Right.
it's like, do I just beat the traffic? And so you miss out on what you thought was going to happen. And in boxing, I mean, it's such a part of the culture right now, where it's like the close fights, the swing rounds, all of those things, and because of the different judges, the different styles of fights, and what people cater to and like, there's so much of an unknown in that if we removed it, we could see some things where we may not like as much. It might sting a little bit for us, culturally, and just kind of the change management of getting used to that. But I like it. I think that if we did show more often and official scorecards, especially versus some of these unofficials, because just as we're talking about these different fights. Mannix, for example, when he showed his scorecard of the Callum fight, and it was like round 6, and he had it like a draw, and I'm like, wait a minute, no, I'm pretty sure Callum won at least the first about 4 of those rounds. How do you have it a draw? And it ended up making sense closer towards the end of the fight, but like you said, in the beginning of the fight, you're like, okay, that didn't make any sense. How did that person's scorecard, look like that? You can kind of start to assess some of those things a little bit sooner and earlier. But I'd be all for it for sure.
So a couple things just to kind of, like I said, jump on what you guys are saying. Great stuff. One thing I've said in the past is for Miss Liza that we should have money allocated for any boxing event that's put on in the United States for your foundations like your own, whether it be a 1%, 2% of the gate, where that goes towards the fighter's health and well-being. And anytime you're going to be like, say I'm a promoter and I have Stephen Reese Promotions. All right, it's going to cost you X amount of money, but don't forget 1% of the ticket revenues generated goes towards this Boxer Fighter Foundation fund. And we have that we grow that fund in every state in the United States, New York, Florida, California, Texas, what have you. So that way, before you know it, you have a good little chunk of money that a foundation like your own could say, hey, we have this to where this treatment that who's the gentleman from Puerto Rico that the WBC does a great job with as well, with Nancy and Suleiman, Pritchard Colon. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
So imagine you have this fund and you're able to give money towards anything that he might need for his medical expenses or things like that. And I'm not saying that they do or don't, but that would be a great avenue to have to start to grow that. So as it grows, we are able to make a difference, and fans are able to feel proud, almost like a Wounded Warrior project, where you know where this money's going. So yeah, I paid $5,000 for ringside seats, but I know I also donated towards the health and the future of future fighters that, God forbid, they need something with medical expenses or doctors, things like that. There's a fund that got built up because of fans like myself, that we have money now to allocate towards resources that they need. That's the first thing that I said for a long time. So Sterling, my man Williams, he agrees with me there. He says Social Security for boxing, good idea. They're just building that fun for these guys. The second thing is, like I said, I think you do that live scoring again, not for every fight, because after the Pitbull Cruz and the Fierro fight, the fight of the year to me, so far, Pitbull Cruz versus that gentleman, and then after that, Cool Boy Steph, who's I'm a fan of him. He fought after that, and everybody was kind of like, "Oh, this fight's boring." But it's like, well, they sadly they have to go after what some consider fight of the year, so it's going to be tough. But to y'all's point, where you don't need live scoring that fight because you know round after round after round who it went to. But it's sports, and just like in sports, we had all those fans in Miami who walked out of that Miami Spurs game. Remember, they were all walking out. They left. The doors got shut behind them, and Ray Allen hits it for the 3 to tie it.
And they couldn't get back in.
And they couldn't get back in. You sons of guns. That's what you get. You abandoned your squad in a time of need, and now you want to be there to hold the trophy? I don't think so. So I think, like you guys are saying, live scoring, but maybe for special championship events, and then maybe only championship rounds, because then you could be like, oh, snap. They have it 97, 98, what have you. I need to get it in gear. Or, okay, I was coasting a little bit, but I need to do a little bit better. Maybe not so much for a shutout of a young prospect fighting a guy that it might not be as competitive. We don't need live round by round scoring on that. But those are just my thoughts. But that's what happens. Just like baseball with the time clock, with the pitching. We're going to try something. It could work. If it doesn't work, we could take it off. But we are just trying to improve the game. And if not, I'm sure Miss Liza knows, all tweaks are not good tweaks. But sometimes you're like, hey, we found something here with this. Let's stick with it. So I'd be down to try it. The only thing I'm a little bit iffy about is Turkey's thing with the VR, the virtual what's it called, Tommy? Where they're gonna track the points.
Oh yeah.
Like the punch counter.
Yeah, the punch. Yeah, the compy box. Yep.
Wait, the one that's already out, or another, or like the fourth official that's VR, the VR.
The one where they're gonna virtual reality was gonna score the points, and I think it was gonna try and score the punches landed. But then it's like it's kind of tough because just like CompuBox, where it's a guy with clicking it, just punch, maybe it didn't land. What if the computer's just seeing maybe like a check or something like that, where it's just scoring onto the VR, but all you're doing is hitting the guy's gloves, or it's not actual scoring. So it can get tricky, because then you could technically win the fight, but did you really win the fight if you never hurt the guy, but he hurt you on just one shot to your 10 volume punches? So like I said, it's just there's so many different things that we're always trying. It's not always going to be the best for some boxing purists, and then some things do got to change.
Yeah. I will say that with respect to the kind of fund for boxers that comes from ticket sales, some states have a pension program for fighters. California is one, although it's just, there's a lot of requirements, right? You have to fight for a certain number of years, and you can't take too many years off. And some of the female fighters are pushing back on that because they're like, well, if I have a baby, I can't, you're not even gonna let me fight if I'm pregnant, right? So there's that. So it's not a perfect program, but it is a pension program, and it's $1 per ticket sale, but it only fights in California, right? So it takes a lot longer for that to add up. So I'd like to see more states have that, and I'd also like to see more, just private. It doesn't always have to be the government, right? It could be private businesses saying, hey, we're gonna just take this on. And like I said, the WBC does have like a grant program for boxers. So there's some of this happening, but it really should be happening on a larger scale, right? We shouldn't have fighters who are world champions who now can't find housing. So I'd love to see a more robust program of, like you mentioned, Stephen.
Hey, we about to spawn it and get it going. It's happening. That's what I'm talking about.
I always tell Tommy I have all these great ideas, but he don't even answer my phone. He's always like, I'm busy, man. I'm like, it was a good idea. You missed it.
Yeah. I gotta wake up early and then time it and then call him when he's at work, and then he won't answer then. Phone tag.
Well, Miss Liza, I don't want to keep you any longer than you need to be. You've given us so much. You've been such a guest. Again, one of my highlights that I've been looking forward to, because we have boxers, we have coaches and we love them. I mean, that's what we do this, but it is also great to see other sides. We've had sports masseuse, a kadosh therapy, where we just want to see every aspect of it. And everybody that we talk to is just like yourself. They all have the same common ground of, I'm here to help the fighters, the boxers succeed in any way I can. That's what we do. That's what we do this show for. That's why we have young fighters on the show as much as we can. Let's get your name out there. Let's give you an outlet. Let's give you an avenue to advocate for yourself, because good people like yourself need to be known in the boxing game of saying, hey, I did have a contractual question. She could help me maybe, and it leads to something good for that person. God forbid anybody, any fighter, guy or girl is getting fleeced out of their hard-earned money. That's something we don't want to see. So having somebody like you with the knowledge that you have, man, I hope everything for you blows up, because you're doing a tremendous job with your foundation, with your boxing niche that you're in, with your IG reels. Nobody's has what you have, and that's what drew me in when I was like, I'm in all these boxing things. I'm like, a boxing lawyer? I haven't even heard of this. And this is
thank you, Stephen.
and we know they exist, but they're kind of in the background. Yeah. They're reading phone books worth of contracts, and things like that. But then I want you guys to be able to say it's not like that. And yeah, the split's got to be right. You have to have an amount there. You need to have a commission that's sanctioning it. You need to have XYZ before, because like I said, I think that phrase got overused. I tell Tommy all the time, send the contract. What am I sending, dude? Like, do you like me? Yes or no? Do you want to fight? Yes or no? Maybe.
Circle, yes.
Right.
Circle. I mean, it's very.
You sent it back with a duck on it. What is this?
There's a lot of stuff that's involved, and it's great that we have knowledgeable, passionate boxing folks like yourself that let us in on that insight. So if you can give your shout outs, where they can find you, your passion projects, any last words that you want, we're all here. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate it so much. I will just say, it's not really my foundation. It's Ring of Brotherhood. I'm a part of it, but you can Ring of Brotherhood Foundation. I don't have the exact website in front of me. I'm sorry, but if you Google Ring of Brotherhood Foundation, you will find the website. My law firm's website is www.lizabreretonlaw.com, LIZABRERETON. And I'm also on Instagram and TikTok, although Instagram I find is really more where the real boxing folks are, as opposed to just casual fans who have a lot of opinions about things. That's more of the TikTok world. But on Instagram, you can find me through my first and last name, and my handle is OneTime, WONTIME.
Yes. And she's a K-Dot fan.
I am. I'm a big K-Dot fan.
Yeah.
I've seen Kendrick 5 times, and it'll be 6, and it'll be 7 in May when I see him at SoCai.
And can you shout out your pup?
My what?
Your pup, your dog.
Oh, my doggie, actually, she passed away a while back.
Oh my goodness. It's okay.
Sorry, it's been a while, but Rosie was my little pit bull baby, and she was the best. I had her for 14 years.
Oh, I'm sorry. I saw him when I was scrolling, and I was like, "Oh, what a pretty dog."
Yeah, Rosie was the best.
Well,
yes.
Thank you so much for your time, man. It's just amazing when we have folks like you. So, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the invitation, and it's been fun talking to you guys.
Yes. This has been absolutely phenomenal. It's been a pleasure having you on. Once again, this has been episode 121 of the Standing A podcast. And man, it's been a great one. Great one. We appreciate all of y'all. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for supporting. Thank you for watching. Everybody in the comments. We've had great comments out there. Shout out to everybody that engaged in those comments. We look forward to the next time. We out, y'all. See y'all. Have a great one.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.